Welcome to Threads of Truth, a podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, a quiet babysitting job in a small Wisconsin town, a routine Friday night in Crosse, October 24th, 1953. The parents leave, a 15-year-old high school student settles in, and the doors are dutifully locked. But by morning, she was gone. Doors still locked from the inside, blood on the walls, a missing girl who would never be found, leaving behind a terrifying, enduring silence that fundamentally fractured the sense of safety in the American Midwest.
Yeah, it's a deeply unsettling one. What draws us to the sources on the disappearance of Evelyn Hartley is not just the tragedy itself, but the perfect snapshot it provides. It's this collision, really, of a pre-forensic age investigation with just sheer community panic.
Right.
We're exploring a case that became, well, a logistical nightmare for 1950s law enforcement, and it resulted in one of the most frustrating cold cases in Wisconsin history. It's a study in what happens when the tools of the time simply aren't, sharp enough to capture the truth.
That's exactly what we are here to unpack. We've gathered the key documents, reports, eyewitness accounts surrounding the disappearance of 15-year-old Evelyn Hartley. Our mission today is to walk through that unprecedented, truly massive search effort. We want to analyze the scant physical evidence they did find, critique the key suspects based on the limited technology of the era, and understand why this story still resonates so strongly 70 years later. Let's explore the evidence and the historical constraints that really defined this search for justice. Okay, so to begin, let's set the scene. Establish the people involved. Evelyn Grace Hartley. She was just 15, a sophomore at Central High School there in La Crosse.
Right.
And this wasn't just some random gig. She was babysitting for the Rasmussen family. There was a connection, a comfort level there.
Yeah, that's important. Evelyn's father, Richard Hartley, he was actually a faculty colleague of Professor Viggo Rasmussen, so it felt completely secure.
Exactly. And the child she was watching was only 20 months old. Yeah. Very young.
The whole environment was just the very picture of mid-century American suburban trust. But that trust started to fray around 8:30 that evening.
Okay, how so?
Well, Evelyn was known to be diligent. She was expected to check in with her parents by phone. Standard procedure back then.
Right.
When the line stayed silent, her father, Richard Hartley, he didn't just wait around. He drove straight over to the Rasmussen home on Sussex Street.
So he felt something was wrong pretty quickly.
Immediately. That immediate alarm, rather than, say, waiting until the Rasmussens got back, it saved crucial time. But unfortunately, it only confirmed the worst fears.
So when he arrived,
yeah,
what did he find?
The situation was immediately bewildering.
Right.
And sinister. All the exterior doors were locked.
Locked, yeah. That's the first major point of sort of conflict in the crime scene. If someone forced their way in, why lock the doors when leaving? Or were they locked before? It doesn't quite add up.
It creates a kind of paradox, doesn't it? It does. A burglar probably wouldn't waste time securing the exit. A planned abductor might, maybe to delay discovery. But the way they got in suggests more opportunism.
How did he get in then, if the doors were locked?
Richard Hartley eventually found an unlocked basement window, but the screen had actually been removed and was lying outside on the ground.
Okay, so that's the entry point.
Definitely seems like the entry point.
Yeah.
But then those locked doors later, it suggests maybe a deliberate attempt to mislead. Or maybe just a moment of panic control by whoever did this.
And once he got inside, the scene, it wasn't subtle.
No, not at all. The level of violence was shocking, especially for, a routine Friday night babysitting job in La Crosse. The home showed immediate, brutal signs of a struggle.
Like what specifically?
Overturned furniture, a lamp knocked over, and the lights and radio were all still on. It suggests the disruption was incredibly sudden and total.
Wow.
And here's the element that really defines the horror of this particular crime. The 20-month-old baby. She was found asleep, completely unharmed in the house.
Unharmed? So this wasn't some generalized robbery or violence aimed at the whole house.
Exactly. The target was specifically Evelyn Hartley. Her presence was interrupted violently, but the baby was left totally in peace. It just underscores this specific, singular, predatory intent focused entirely on the young woman.
Let's talk about the crime scene evidence they were actually able to collect back in 1953. So besides the open basement window and that removed screen, you mentioned pry marks.
Yes, pry marks on other windows of the home.
Oh, okay. Not just the one they got through.
Right. And that detail is vital, I think. It suggests The perpetrator didn't just stumble upon the one unlocked window. They were actively casing the house, trying multiple ways in until they found the path of least resistance.
So that points more towards determination, maybe premeditation.
It could, yeah. It speaks to determination. Maybe a prowler determined to get into a residence that night, which, could lean towards the idea of a random predator rather than someone who knew the Rasmussens or the layout intimately.
And inside, the struggle was clearly desperate. Evelyn's personal things were scattered.
Yeah, her broken glasses were found. And her shoes were scattered too, notably. One shoe upstairs, one downstairs.
Which suggests she was fighting back, moving through the house.
It certainly looks that way, defending herself, moving, struggling.
But the most chilling evidence, the blood trail.
Indeed. That's the kind that immediately signals tragedy. There were pools of blood found inside the house, on the carpet and a door. They matched Evelyn's blood type. And crucially, the struggle wasn't just contained inside. Blood was tracked outside into the yard.
Outside, too.
Yes. And investigators even found clear, bloody handprints left on a nearby garage.
Handprints. Wow. That level of violence resulting in significant bleeding outside. It suggests a severe injury or just an incredibly fierce resistance from her.
Utterly fierce, yes.
And that evidence obviously mobilized the community in a way that, well, we rarely see today. The search effort that launched was massive, wasn't it?
Huge. One of the largest in Wisconsin history, actually. They estimate somewhere between 1,000, maybe even 2,000 people were involved.
2,000 people.
Yeah. And this wasn't just, neighbors and concerned citizens. We're talking the National Guard, faculty and students from the nearby college, the entire local police force. The scale just reflects the profound terror this crime injected into the community. Small-town police forces in the 1950s, they just weren't equipped logistically or psychologically to handle an abduction this brutal, especially one where the victim vanishes without a trace.
So in that initial phase, they used tracking dogs.
They did. And the dogs followed Evelyn's scent for about 2 blocks down to a street called Cooley Drive.
Okay.
But here's the key insight. The scent just abruptly stopped right there.
Stop.
Completely stopped. And that sudden cessation of the scent trail, that's the clearest sign that the investigation had to shift gears immediately. It provided near certainty that Evelyn was put into a vehicle at that exact spot. So the case instantly moved from a local search and rescue type operation to a vehicle abduction scenario, which complicates the search exponentially, across state lines, distant areas.
Right, whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And the investigative tactics they used back then, in 53, they really are a window into the desperation, but also the limitations of the era. They resorted to some truly controversial measures.
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about the polygraph plan first. Authorities launched this, highly controversial effort to administer mass lie detector tests. They intended to test 1,750 high school boys.
Wait, 1,750 boys, high school students.
Yes. Think about that for a moment. 1,750 minors subjected to questioning about a violent abduction and potential murder, based largely on the assumption that, a local boy must be involved. It speaks volumes about the kind of societal profiling they were employing.
The sheer scale of that.
Yeah.
Trying to test almost every young man in the school system. It's staggering.
It is. And the effort was actually halted after only about 300 students had been tested. But the implication is still there. Police were essentially engaging in a dragnet based on a demographic profile, not on specific concrete evidence pointing to those boys.
When you lack physical evidence, you grasp at straws, I suppose.
You resort to psychological tools, exactly, no matter how dubious their scientific merit might be. And that's a point we definitely need to circle back to when we talk about key suspects and how they were cleared.
And if the polygraph plan wasn't invasive enough, there was the car inspection idea.
Right. They tried to implement a system to inspect every car in the county.
Every single one.
What was the intent? Inspect the trunk and back seat of every single vehicle in La Crosse County. They were even issuing these little My Car ISOK stickers to vehicles that had been cleared.
Wow. That sounds almost like a martial law like.
It's the definition of a county-wide near-martial mobilization, yeah. It just shows this desperate attempt to compensate for the lack of modern tools, like centralized tracking or license plate databases. They were forced to physically look inside every car because that was the only way they could possibly check if a victim had been transported by vehicle within the county. It's a level of community surveillance that would be, frankly, unthinkable today without massive legal hurdles.
But amidst all this massive effort and these unusual tactics, they did get a couple of potential breaks from witness sightings, right?
Yeah.
They provide a terrifying timeline.
They do. A neighbor reported hearing screams around 7 p.m. that evening.
7 p.m.
Yeah, which they tragically just dismissed at the time as kids playing outside.
Heartbreaking.
Isn't it? But the crucial report came just minutes later, around 7:50 a.m. A man driving nearby said he narrowly avoided a speeding car, and he managed to get a pretty good look at it.
What did he see?
He described it as a dark green two-tone 1942 Buick.
Okay, specific make and model, and inside.
And what the witness saw inside that Buick, that's the chilling detail that seems to confirm the violent abduction.
Go on.
He noted a driver, and critically, a second man in the backseat. And the second man was actively restraining a girl who appeared sort of slumped over.
Suggesting she was already injured, maybe unconscious.
Exactly. Being held down inside the moving car. This 7:15 p.m. time frame fits perfectly with the chaos found inside the Rasmussen home, suggesting a rapid, violent attack, leading to a very quick vehicle getaway just those 2 blocks away where the dogs lost the scent. #tag physical evidence, suspects, and internet theories.
Okay, so the immediate investigation might have been a bit chaotic, with the car inspections and the questionable polygraphs, but days later, actual physical evidence started to turn up.
In different locations, right? Offering something tangible.
That's right. Days after she vanished, several blood-stained articles of clothing were discovered, and they weren't near the house. They were found at different, seemingly random spots further away.
What kind of clothing?
Included a bra, a denim jacket, and pair of underpants. And the blood on the underpants. I understand the analysis was quite specific for the time, confirming it was likely Evelyn.
Yes. The underwear contained menstrual blood. And since they already knew Evelyn's blood type, likely using the standard ABO blood typing, they had back then this provided strong confirmation that the clothing almost certainly belonged to her. It confirmed she'd been moved from the scene and that the violent act resulted in her being, well, undressed, either during the struggle or maybe later by the abductor.
Grim details. But the single most crucial piece of physical evidence that emerged, the one that offered the most direct potential clue about the abductor, was found near where that scent trail vanished, wasn't it?
The sneakers. A pair of size 11 Goodrich sneakers.
Size 11.
Yes. And that discovery was potentially a game changer. These sneakers were definitively linked to the crime because their unique sole pattern matched footprints found outside the Rasmussen home, right near that open basement window.
Okay, so a direct physical link between the shoe's owner and the scene.
Exactly. It immediately established that connection.
Now, this is where we really see the limitations, but also maybe the surprising strengths of 1950s forensics.
Mm-hmm.
No DNA, obviously. But they had other techniques, right? Like analyzing wear patterns.
They did, and they executed what was actually a pretty brilliant piece of non-genetic profiling based on those shoes.
What did they figure out?
Analysis of the specific wear pattern on the sole of those size 11 Goodrich sneakers suggested the owner frequently worked with machinery. Or, even more specifically, maybe drove a whizzer motorbike.
Okay, hang on. A whizzer motorbike. What exactly is that for those of us listening who aren't familiar? And why is that detail so important for profiling someone in 1953 La Crosse?
Right, good question. A whizzer was a very popular, sort of inexpensive motorized bicycle or scooter, really common in the post-war period, often used by working class guys, younger men maybe, who couldn't afford a full motorcycle or a car.
Okay.
And the specific wear pattern on the sole, like the way the heel might scuff or the ball of the foot wears down, it was characteristic of the posture and the action required to start or operate that particular type of machine or vehicle.
So it gave them a profile.
It helped construct an early profile, yeah. A larger man, given the size 11 shoe. Likely working class or at least mechanically inclined. And potentially using a very distinctive, specific mode of local transport. It helped narrow down the suspect pool, at least conceptually, within the local area.
So with this limited but quite specific profile large man, maybe works with machines, possibly drives a whizzer. Investigators started looking at locals and maybe people passing through, and inevitably, the name that surfaces, given the place and time, It's Ed Gein.
Yeah, the Ed Gein connection became a pretty dominant theory early on within law enforcement. Gein, of course, was the notorious killer and grave robber whose, well, gruesome activities would later just shock the state and the nation.
And why him specifically for Evelyn?
He was considered a major suspect primarily because he was reportedly visiting relatives right there in the La Crosse area that very weekend Evelyn disappeared.
Just coincidence.
Well, it wasn't an isolated suspicion either. Authorities had already sort of loosely connected him to the 1947 disappearance of Georgia Weckler, another unsolved case from that region. So the timing and location put him on the radar.
Okay, a classic case of connecting dots using circumstantial timing and geography. But here's the critical point. Especially considering the limits of 1953 forensics, Gene was questioned, right?
Yeah, right.
And polygraphed.
He was subjected to police questioning and, crucially, 2 separate polygraph tests regarding Evelyn Hartley.
And the result?
He passed both.
Passed.
Passed both. And that, back in 1953, was largely seen as sufficient for authorities to clear a suspect, especially one like Gein, whose truly horrific activities hadn't been exposed yet.
But looking back now, through our modern lens, we have to critique that heavily, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. Polygraph technology in the 50s was rudimentary at best, and its reliability is highly questionable even today. For someone potentially pathological, like Gein later proved to be, someone with profound detachment from reality, a lie detector test, which just measures physiological stress responses, might be utterly useless. He might not register deception in the way a typical person would.
That's the key analytical point here, isn't it? Did the limited, arguably flawed technology of the era allow a potential monster later proven capable of just unspeakable acts to slip through the net in this case?
It's a huge question.
And adding to that, when Gein's farm was eventually searched years later, after his other crimes came to light, no physical evidence connecting him to Evelyn Hartley was ever found there.
That's correct. No link was ever established at his property. So that formally cleared him in the eyes of the investigation at the time. But the lingering question about the validity of those polygraph tests, it hangs heavy over the case.
It really creates a fascinating legal and historical dilemma. A lack of evidence isn't proof of innocence, necessarily. And the main tool used to establish his innocence back then was deeply flawed.
Precisely.
Okay, so Gein is officially cleared. Decades pass. Then the case takes another really bizarre turn, right? With this fringe theory based on a supposed confession, long after the main players were gone, involving men named Clyde Tywee Peterson and Jack Golfair.
Yeah, this was much later. This revelation, or alleged revelation, emerged in 2004. It was brought forward by a man named Mel Williams.
And what did he have?
Williams presented a tape recording, an audio recording supposedly made in a bar back in 1969, so 16 years after Evelyn vanished.
A bar recording from 69.
Okay. On this tape, Clyde Tywee Peterson allegedly implicated himself. Jack Golfair, who it's important to note had died by suicide 2 years earlier in 1967, and also an unnamed third person in Evelyn's murder.
He confessed on tape. What did he say happened?
The claim on the tape was specific, that they had killed her and buried her body near Lafarge, Wisconsin.
Wow. A deathbed confession, practically, caught on tape in a bar. That sounds almost too cinematic. What did the investigators do with this?
Well, authorities did try to investigate it, naturally, but the difficulties were pretty much insurmountable.
How so?
Both the named men, Peterson and Golfair, were deceased by 2004. The tape's credibility hinges entirely on the audio quality, the context of a bar conversation from decades prior. And most importantly, authorities have been completely unable to corroborate the claim with any physical evidence whatsoever.
They searched near Lafarge.
Yes, searches were conducted in the area mentioned, but without finding a body, without a specific burial site pinpointed, or any physical link connecting Peterson or Golfair back to the actual blood evidence and footprints found at the La Crosse crime scene in 1953, the confession remains officially unproven, unsubstantiated.
So it just adds another layer of complexity, another what if, but no real answers.
Exactly. More frustration, really.
Despite all this time, 70 years of silence and frustration, this case has never really faded from public consciousness, has it? It remains a kind of classic, unsolved American mystery, especially online.
Oh, absolutely. It generates constant discussion, particularly in places like Reddit, on the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit. People are still trying to piece it together. That two-tone Buick, the size 11 sneakers, the timeline, the locked doors.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it speaks to a deep human need for narrative completion, for answers, especially when a vulnerable young life is just snatched away from such a supposedly safe everyday setting like babysitting.
And its cultural footprint is pretty significant too, isn't it? It's often mentioned in connection with Thomas Harris's work.
It is. The idea of a phantom killer operating in a small, seemingly safe community, the nature of the abduction itself. You can see how elements of this kind of trauma might be reflected in stories like The Silence of the Lambs. Though there's no direct confirmation Harris based anything specifically on Hartley.
But the echoes are there.
The echoes feel present, yeah. And it's also been featured in modern documentaries and true crime series, which keeps reinforcing its legacy. It's become a symbol, in a way, of mid-century American innocence lost.
And that Ed Gein angle, even though officially debunked in this specific case, it probably helps keep it in the media spotlight too.
Undoubtedly. It's mentioned in series like Netflix's Monster. The Ed Gein story, for example, illustrates its lasting grip on the true crime landscape, even if the connection itself lacks solid proof. It's part of mythology now. #tag analysis and takeaway.
Okay, let's move into the final analysis phase now. When we look back at all the evidence, all the threads, we're still left with these competing scenarios, aren't we? Was this a targeted attack maybe by someone who knew Evelyn or knew the Rasmussens, or was it a completely random stranger abduction?
Yeah, the evidence really pulls you in conflicting directions. It's frustrating. On one hand, you have those extensive pry marks found on multiple windows. That suggests a determined, possibly random prowler who is casing the neighborhood, just looking for any opportunity, any unlocked window or door. That leans pretty heavily towards the random predator-stranger abduction theory. Evelyn being there was just terrible timing, terrible luck.
If it was just a random prowler who happened to get lucky with that basement window, why the seemingly organized, rapid vehicle getaway? The dogs losing the scent right at the road, the witness seeing two men restraining her in that Buick.
Exactly. That part feels planned. The speed, the organized restraint scene in the back of that 42 Buick, the abrupt end of the scent trail, it all strongly implies a quick, possibly pre-planned vehicle getaway.
Which seems to contradict the image of a simple panicked prowler just grabbing an opportunity.
It does. Unless perhaps the individual was prowling randomly but already had the means of transport right there, ready to go. Or maybe the target wasn't random after all, but the method of entry itself was improvised when other attempts failed. We just don't know.
And it's fascinating thinking about that physical profile from the sneaker size 11, linked to machinery, maybe that Whizzer motorbike.
Yeah.
That feels very specific, very localized.
Yeah.
How effectively could investigators even use that kind of profile back in 1953?
Well, they certainly tried. They attempted to cross-reference that profile with local known offenders or individuals known to own such vehicles. But remember, this was an incredibly arduous manual process back then. No databases to query.
Right.
And what's crucial is that this profile, specific as it sounds, only really provided an occupational or maybe a lifestyle hint. It couldn't give them a name. It certainly couldn't provide a genetic ID.
So without DNA.
Without the ability to genetically profile any potential sweat residue inside the shoes or definitively link the blood found to a specific individual beyond blood type, they were essentially relying on shoe size and treadwear patterns to find a needle in a massive haystack. It highlights a profound limitation of the time.
Which brings us squarely to the most defining constraint of this entire 1953 investigation, the limited forensic technology. If this exact crime happened today, how different would the initial hours and days be?
Oh, the difference would be instantaneous and very likely case solving. Back in 1953, they relied on basic ABO blood typing. That could only narrow the blood down to one of four major groups, A, B, AB, or O, which includes, huge percentages of the population, highly nonspecific.
Whereas today?
Today, the blood found on that carpet, on the garage door, the blood on the recovered clothing. It would immediately be subjected to PCR amplification, STR analysis, generating a detailed, unique genetic profile, a DNA fingerprint.
Which could be run against databases, potentially identify family members through genealogy sites.
Exactly. The toolkit is vastly different. Instead, the 1953 investigators were forced to rely on tools that, looking back, were just highly fallible. They had the polygraph tests, which we've discussed. They had circumstantial connections like the one to Ed Gein. And they had physical evidence, like shoes, that offered only these vague hints about occupation or habits.
It's painful to think about. All that material evidence, collected: the blood, the clothing, the shoes, handled, collected, cataloged. But none of it could be preserved or analyzed to modern genetic standards.
It couldn't. This case is just a tragic, painful example of a horrific crime occurring at the absolute worst time, technologically speaking, right before the entire forensic revolution really took hold. If this had happened even, say, 5 or 10 years after DNA profiling became standard police practice, it's overwhelmingly likely we would have had an answer long ago.
Beyond the forensics, though, we also have to consider the immediate and profound societal impact this case had. On La Crosse, yes, but also on similar small communities across the Midwest and maybe the country.
Absolutely. This case fundamentally altered local perceptions of personal safety. Before Evelyn's disappearance, you hear stories. It was common practice in many smaller American towns to just leave your doors unlocked. The idea of violent, random predation felt remote, something that happened in big cities, maybe.
But this was different.
This brutal locked door abduction, where a trusted teenage babysitter was the specific target in someone else's home, it shattered that illusion permanently. It was genuinely one of the pivotal events that caused residents in La Crosse and likely elsewhere to start locking their doors religiously, a loss of innocence for the whole community.
It created a kind of generational trauma, didn't it? The idea that a secure, known environment, a house locked up for the night with a baby sleeping and a responsible teenager in charge, could be violated so completely, so violently.
Absolutely. And I think the story continues to resonate so strongly today, partly because it speaks to that enduring vulnerability, the vulnerability of a trusted role like a babysitter, and the violation of a supposedly safe space. And the lack of a body, the lack of any real resolution. It means the community, and certainly the family, have never been able to fully process the trauma or achieve closure. The perpetrator remains a faceless shadow, reinforcing that fear that the threat could still be out there, unidentified, even after 70 years.
It really makes you reconsider every single step of that original investigation. As we close our exploration of Evelyn Hartley's disappearance today, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought. Something for you to mull over, particularly in the context of criminal justice history. We talked about how a suspect like Ed Gain was effectively cleared based on passing 2 polygraph tests back in 1953, a technology we now view as highly controversial, unreliable, especially maybe for screening pathological personalities. Now imagine if modern comprehensive DNA analysis were possible today on the blood evidence found in the Rasmussen home, and imagine that DNA definitively did not match Ed Gain. If that were the case, how might the authorities' reliance on that flawed 1950s technology, the polygraph, have inadvertently protected the real perpetrator, by perhaps causing them to look less intensely at other local suspects after Gain passed? How might that have altered the entire course, the entire history of this decades-long search for justice?
It's a chilling thought. The tools available in an era don't just limit the search for truth. They can actively define the boundaries of justice itself, sometimes incorrectly. The confidence placed, perhaps misplaced, in a pseudoscience like early polygraphy, it may very well have cost Evelyn Hartley the answers and the closure her family and her community have deserved for so long.
Our thoughts remain with the Hartley family and the community of La Crosse, still haunted by this case's eerie, unending silence after more than 70 years. Their perseverance in keeping Evelyn's memory and story alive is truly a testament to the enduring hope for eventual answers.
We can only hope that perhaps one day, maybe through advances in forensic genealogy working with any preserved evidence, that some form of answer might still emerge.
Next time on Threads of Truth, we revisit the haunting disappearance of Sneha Phillip, the doctor who vanished the night before 9/11. Did tragedy strike in the Twin Towers, or did new clues finally reveal where she went? Join us next time for more Threads of Truth.